Well, good day, everybody. So it's a busy day today, Easter Monday, and all that sort of stuff. You might get sick of seeing me, but anyway, I've got the questions and answers situation to go through. We've got about 30 questions apparently, or comments. Some of these will be comments, not all questions. So I'll roll this through all the answers to your questions. These are Facebook questions for the YouTubers. And next week or the next time we do a list of questions, they'll be on YouTube, so you get the chance to answer your questions there anyway. So, okay, so first question coming up, Margaret Keys. All entrants have paid their fees, which should mean that everyone who's still sailing around the world should be shown on the tracker and listed, no matter their standing. Guys should be on the tracker. Can you make that change for next time? The answer is no. It's a pretty simple answer, once the person's out of the event for whatever reason, then in the case of Guy, they're not in the event. And it's important that there's a clear disconnect there, because there are liability issues and concept issues and all sorts of things. So you're either in the event or you're not in the event. And sadly, Guy's not in the event, but he's still our mate, and he's still part of the GGR family. You know, he's been an entrant in the GGR, and we follow up with that on occasion, as we do with Pat and Ayrton and things like that. You know, people like to know what's going on. So we do that. And in the case of Chichester, they're still on the tracker. They're not racing. They're not part of the GGR race anymore. So they're not part of the GGR, because the GGR is the Golden Globe race, but they are part of the event. And the event is the overall journey, the adventure, do whatever. They're sailing home effectively. Once they go Chichester, they're out of the game. You know, they're not in the game anymore. And but they are in the event. And there's a defining line there. So that's why Guy unfortunately isn't on the tracker, but he's still our mates and he's doing a great job, and we accept that, and we love what he's doing, and it's part of getting out there and having a go. You know, I fiercely support anyone that's involved with adventure. So, but there's issues with the Golden Globe race, and that's why we do what we do. Okay, Leslie Campbell. If a GGR sailor loses fuel, why should this mean a penalty if the fuel is in the bilges, as in the case of the weight of the fuel is still carried in the rest of the race? It's not so much that as, first of all, you got to imagine, what would you do if you had the fuel in the bilges? You couldn't survive inside the boat. If you ever tried it, the fuel in the bilge actually creates off sort of like fumes, which you're breathing, and it stings your eyes and all that sort of stuff. You cannot do it. You could try and evacuate it and put it in containers if you had them. And then if you had the containers, you know, we could look at that at the end of the fuel thing. But is that the case? I don't know. In fact, there's a funny story here with the fuel situation. I am very involved with lots of different things within the GGR, and some things, I get some of the SoundCloud calls. I don't get some of them because I'm not there or I'm doing something else or whatever. And the fuel leak for Abolish was a story that Lutz and Seb actually told me. He said, "Oh, he had some fuel leaks and stuff," and I took them I took that as a given. And Lutz is now gone. But I said to Seb the other day, "Say, hey, how much fuel did Abolish lose?" You know, and then he started thinking, "Oh, did he lose some fuel?" So it's all a bit confusing where that story came from, and I can't go back and look at all the SoundClouds and everything. So we're going to actually ask Abolish on the next SoundCloud exactly what the fuel leak was and how much he might have lost. And so if the fuel's not there, then you can't do it. And a few people have said, "Oh, they could fill their tanks up with salt water, when we put it in." And they could too. But if they did, when we motor the boat from the marina across to the fuel dock, the engine would conk out because the water's at the bottom and it's sucked through the system and the engine goes boom. Or if it didn't happen then, it would certainly happen after we filled up and motored back to the marina. So no one's going to put salt water in their fuel tanks. But anyway, and so if the fuel is lost, it's not available on the boat, and so we calculate the fuel penalty based on that. Okay, next one. Gillian, on the race page leaderboard described as all boats, but it's not. And then there is Chichester class. Well, there's all okay. Would it be more inclusive to list all boats on the one page and different Chichester classes on another page, and everyone has had a tough time in one way or the other? The separate tab for the Chichester class feels a bit mean-spirited. No, it's not mean-spirited. It's just a stacking of classifications. Sometimes in some events there might be 3 or 4 different classes, and so they'll do that on different things. We don't actually run the tracking page. That's YB do that themselves, and we are happy to use that tracking page. It doesn't cost, or it only costs a few hundred, not a huge amount of money to set that up. We just pay them to put the course on and this, that, and the other. But it's basically a standard YB tracking page for events that many other events in the world sometimes use. Okay, and this one's the biggest one they do around the world. So we don't have control over that, but I'm quite happy. You've got Chichester class there. You just press one link, one button, boom. You got the Chichester boats, and then you've got the other boats, all the boats that are racing in the GGR, and there's a difference. So that's why it's the way it is. Okay, so next one from John Edward. What has been the most pleasant surprise to you personally from GGR 22 from September the 4th until present day? If you can't think of one, just think of several. What's been the most pleasant surprise? The most pleasant surprise is all the boats getting through the Southern Ocean and around Cape Horn without what I'd call extreme storms that caused havoc. And I was very happy to see that. And I think the reason I'm surprised is I thought it would be that way because we delayed the start for 2 months specifically for that case. But the second part to that was the anomaly with the weather over the Antarctic, which dragged all of the storms and the low pressure systems further south again. So that was a pleasant surprise in that we didn't get woken up in the middle of the night for strange reasons, people losing their mast and all that sort of stuff. Touch wood, touch wood. But that was a real surprise and very pleasing to see. The funny irony to that is in 2018, when we lost a few boats and all that sort of stuff, a lot of people but some sailors hated the GGR. They said it was the worst thing that happened to the sport of sailing ever. Ruined the ocean racing forever, and it should never have been run, and all this sort of stuff. But that's life, and that's can't please everyone all the time. But it was a grand adventure, and a lot of people appreciated the ability to follow it and watch it, and all the entrants were very happy to have been involved. Otherwise, they wouldn't have signed up in the beginning. And so it was sad to lose Tapio's boat. But the irony now is that we're down to 3 entrants left. At least we had 5 finishes in the last race. We've now got 3 heading for the finish line, and yet we only lost 1 boat. And so statistically, that's a very interesting situation in its own right, and who knows what 2026 is going to be. But what I've got to tell you, the interest in 2026 is hugely strong. The number of inquiries is amazing. And so anyway, let's wait and see. But yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. So thanks, John. From Noel, is the folding propeller allowed, or has it got to be a fixed propeller? No, you can have any propeller under the notice of race as long as you can make your hull speed from the original design of the boat. And a few of the entrants were planning to go around with fixed blade propellers, but we worked it out in 2018 because a couple of entrants did have fixed blade props, and it adds nearly 2 weeks to your finishing time. Okay, you have a 3-blade fixed prop. We did all the technical analysis, and if I remember rightly, it was over 2 weeks. So you would no way want to sail around the GGR with a fixed prop, even though you could if you wanted to, if you're short of money. Okay, Akhtar. Hi, Don. Why do you miss weekly satellite calls sometimes? It is quite fun and up to the point whenever you are talking to the entrants, never meant to say others are bad. It's an interesting point. First of all, to answer your question specifically, sometimes I'm just too busy, or I've got to be away for a day, or it doesn't work out right, or I've got a conference phone call going on when the entrants due to call. And in fact, we're home at the moment, and Jane just said, "Oh, jeepers, we're not in the office." And I said, "Don't worry, it's Easter Monday. No one's working in the office. I work every day, and you should see my table here. It's chaos." But anyway, and then we realized, "Oh, jeepers, someone was ringing today, and we're not there." But the entrants know they can ring my mobile anytime. And that's not the crisis line either. That's just my normal mobile. So maybe we're going to call about that later. But anyway, so sometimes I do miss the calls. To answer your other question, I know what you're saying. It's interesting because Seb and Lutz do a great job when they've been talking to the entrants. But I'm a sailor, and so is Seb, of course. But I've been out there solo, and I've done a solo circumnavigation. So maybe my questions or the way I handle it is a little bit different than Lutz and Seb. So maybe that's what you're referring to, but that's the beauty of, you get sick of me asking all the questions, and you get Lutz ask a completely different range of questions, and Seb's the same. We've got different styles. And in fact, it's funny, when we do these, we have this sort of they're meant to be safety calls, and we're not meant to give them the ability to relax their emotions and so on. We're meant to be benign and a bland sort of nobody, so that they're isolated. But it's impossible to do that. You get sucked in. And I keep saying to Seb sometimes, I say, "Hey, Seb, back off a bit. Don't get too friendly with them. Don't sort of start having fun with the calls because it's a relief for them on their boat, and they're not meant to experience that. They're supposed to be isolated, and this is a safety call." But you can't. You sometimes. I remember the one I had with Abelish maybe last week sometime, when it was dead boring. It was boring because he's in the trades or in the doldrums, and there's nothing happening. The boat's in good condition, the weather's fine, everything's this. So what do we talk about? So you have a bit of fun, and you talk about nothingness or silly stuff, or his secret sale, which he really does have, but that's another story. So so sometimes I just can't make it, and I'm not there. John, not sure this is possible during the Q&A, but could you show a picture or even a model of the various sail types you keep talking about? Spinnakers, genoas, so we can imagine what they are when if you're a non-sailor. I could have actually tried to do that, but effectively what I'm doing is becoming providing entertainment and doing stuff which is not hard to find on Google. So, when we talk about, in fact, hang on, look behind me there. This is a model of Suhaili. This is an Easter bunny, and that's the Golden Globe. Okay, this sail here, this head sail, this triangular shaped one, is actually a jib. I wouldn't call it a genoa, because a genoa is usually going past the mast, and so it's a bigger one. Okay, so that's the jib. The little one in between here, that just behind it, that's called the staysail. And so if that only had one mast, that would be called a cutter rig. And in fact, we've only got one ketch rig in the race, and that's Captain Guga in Nuri. This is the mizzen mast here. It's got like another triangular sail with a boom. So that's at the back of the boat. That's the mizzen. And this big one there, that's the mainsail. Okay, so you've got a jib, a staysail, a mainsail, and a mizzen sail on this. When we talk about a mizzen staysail, okay, so this is the mizzen mast. You imagine in light weather, first of all, they'd have a big genoa up. So there's a sail there that goes right across like that. That's the big head sail. You can change this, just it's held on by hanks or in a furling gear. So that's his big lightweight genoa opened up. And then you run another sort of like a head sail off the top of the mizzen mast coming down here. It's a lightweight material. That's his mizzen staysail. So Good can fit his mizzen, a mizzen staysail, a big light genoa, or even an asymmetric spinnaker, and a mainsail here. Spinnaker is a big parachute type sail out the front, so that's probably enough for a basic sailor. But just get onto Google. Just Google, sailing, how to sail, what's these things, and you'd be surprised how good it is. So, giving you information. Jill, I accept you'll have reasons, but could you explain the thinking behind the penalty rules again, please? We have quite a lot of penalties, so that might be hard. I get it, you can't calculate fuel penalties to you at the dock. However, Kirsten gets an hour of fuel advantage added, her hours of fuel advantage when she lands, but Goog has to serve his penalty time at sea. That's right. Why can't this 4-hour penalty be instigated to finish at the dock? Okay, I can see the difference. All right. So fuel penalty, we don't know. We can't calculate it until she gets back. We've got to put the fuel in and work that out. And then she'll get compensation for Tapio's rescue. That's not a penalty. That's just there. So you've got the fuel use penalty plus compensation. The idea is there are other penalties on the sailing course. So as the boat's sailing and the skipper's sailing it, if they breach something, they'll get a time penalty. And the reason we do the time penalty at sea is that it gets it out of the way. So Goog's got a 4-hour time penalty, and he'll do that at sea. So he's basically he doesn't stop for 4 hours, but he can't go forward towards the finish until his 4-hour time penalty's up, and then he can start again. And that means if you've got 4 or 5 or 6 boats, all with various time penalties from 4 hours to 18 hours to 26 hours, you stop them in the North Atlantic in the trade winds somewhere, and they can't go forward for their penalty time. It means once they've done their penalties, whatever they're doing when they cross the finish line, that's real. There's no calculations, no penalty to do. And that's their real finishing time. And that's why we do it on the course. It's very, it's not unusual. Other events do that as well. And so, because we don't have handicapping as such, we don't have, and it just keeps it simple. So that's the reason we, entrants that have breached a rule or have a time penalty associated with the sailing course, they'll spend that time penalty on the course. Aaron, penalty for losing fuel or leaking fuel into the bilge is not the same. Well, it can be. While fuel leak outside boat is environmentally hazardous and penalty time is explained but not is fine. That's right. So if it's in the bilge and it gets over the side and the fuels disappear, it's gone. But if fuel is leaked in the bilge and not gone overboard, shall not be penalties as the fuel can be recovered from the bilge and doesn't cause environmental issues. Well, if there's a big fuel leak and the sailor wants to capture that fuel and put it back in the tank, then that's fine. Or if he kept the fuel in a clear bottle or something so we could see it, we'd allow that. But that's not as easy as you think, right? That's the reality. So let's wait and see what Abelis says about his so-called fuel leak. He might not have a fuel leak, I'm not sure. But I was led to believe there is a fuel leak or was a fuel leak. So, okay. Vincenzo, what asset assumed Jeremy with his boat during his last storm experience? No sail, storm, jib, only drogues. I think that question is more or less what did he use during Jeremy's last storm experience? I believe he's using warps and so on. No sea anchor. He might have a drogue on the back of that. I forget now. I've got too much in my head. I can't remember. But I believe he would have probably run drogues. He was certainly running bare poles most of the time in that last storm in the peak. So that's no sails at all. He's just getting blown downwind with the wind vane steering. And that especially works when the sea's not too bad. You don't even run warps, and you can stay ahead of it. If the wind vane, he's got a wind pilot, they're quite effective for fast control. And he seems pretty happy with it. So it's steering the boat okay. If all that's working, then no sails, no warps, just going bare poles and going for it. That I know he's bare poles, and I'm not sure whether he was running warps or drogues all the time or not. I don't think he was some of the time. So I'd have to go back and check on that. So I can't be too specific. Everett, you frequently talk about wave height, never about length. I don't have to explain to you this is evenly important to safety and comfort. Aren't these data available? Yes, they are, and I do not frequently, but I do often mention the timeline between the sequencing, of the swells. I've done it in the past, and I did it a lot today talking about Ian because it's different when it's what I call normal. Height versus the length of the swells. Often is you get a feel for what it's like, 10, 11, 12 seconds, depending on how it grows. It's not so specific, but on those occasions in the past, and there's been 2 or 3 or 4 times in the past when we're giving forecasting, I'll talk about the sequence of the swells, how much time is in between each swell. And Ian's today was particularly tight. So he's experiencing all that now, and that's why I related to it. And that often is more relevant in the Atlantic and so on because you're not in the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean tends to sort itself out, and they're pretty normal, and you rarely get the short, steep seas like you do in the North Atlantic. You see all those pictures of ships going, whoa, whack, bang. A lot, and from World War II footage, the same thing, and some crazy sailing footage. And a lot of that is current-induced wind against wave or really huge wind waves. They're not sort of ocean depression swells because when you have the pressure systems, they're the things that are driving these big ground swells. But when you get extreme winds, it's like just a big wind wave, and they're the ones that are close together. And that's sort of what Ian's going through at the moment because this thing's pretty tight and getting intense, but it starts from 0 swell or 1 or 2 meters, and then it just builds up during the course of 24 hours, and then it's gone again. So 24 hours later, or say 36 is 7, 8 meters is reasonable size for the Atlantic. It'll take a few days to die down, but then very soon it might only be back to 1 or 2 meters again, and that doesn't happen so much in the Indian Ocean. So yes, it is very relevant, and it's available on the Windy app. Okay, so if you get onto Windy, you can see that there, but you can't get it on the GGR tracker. I really like the Yellow Brick GGR tracker. It's just enough information to get it right without overloading with information. But to get on Windy and have a good look when you want all the fine details. In fact, there's a lot that I still haven't shown you on Windy. I mean, one's a satellite photo. You just hit one click and you got this latest satellite photo, real time live. on what's happening at that time. So that's always fun to watch. There's a huge amount on Windy, and I pay a little bit extra. I'm plugging Windy here. I pay 18 euro a year or something like that extra to get the professional information, which is even a lot more tools and fun to play with, and it's quite worth it if you're into that stuff. So, Philip, hi, Don. Gutsy predictions this AM. Yeah, that must have been when I was predicting what might happen with Kirsten. I'll do that each Friday. We've got a few weeks to go yet. Because why not? That's basically, I've got an opinion, and I'm sure you all have an opinion as well. But when you start to analyze the weather, you could say, well, by the look of this, and that's what I said again this morning. I said, crikey, if Abelis gets a break and gets into that southwesterly going up through the Azores at the last minute, and then there's a band of no wind, if he gets there and Kirsten gets caught on the other side, big problem. It's big problem. It could be game over. So anyway, great show sailing from all. How much more stressful is it for the sailors now with more marine traffic? Well, we don't talk about it, but if you get on, I think most people know about the marine traffic site. You can get on and you'll see the AIS readout of all the other fishing boats and the ships and so on. And there's some of it's really intense, right? Now, the skippers don't necessarily get that because they can only use the reception of their AIS transponder on board, and they can't read it anyway. So they don't know what other ships are out there. And we don't actually tell them. There's one case of Chinese fishing fleet and a few others after squid down there, calamari, and really intense, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boats, right, in a very small area. But now guys and girls didn't actually go through that fleet. If that was the case, we might have just warned them and say, look, be aware in the next 24 hours, you're going to sail through a fleet of, 400 fishing boats, Chinese militia boats and fishing boats and all sorts of stuff down there. Not that I've got anything against Chinese. Jane's Chinese. I like China, all that sort of stuff. Oh, she's just come out. But there's a lot of fishing boats down there, a lot of Russians, a lot of other countries as well. But yeah, the skippers don't get the stress on that because they don't see it. They've got their immediate horizon and their tools they've got on board for AIS alarms and stuff. And so that's really it. Okay, Bev, why don't we see any tweets, messages from Kirsten? It just says text for her, yet the others have messages. Well, they have to do a text per day. Under the notice of race, they have to do one text a day. And that's a safety connect. We know that when they've done that, we're in touch. If we didn't get that text for 24 hours, we think, are they still on board? Because the boat could be sailing along under wind vane and sails and something might have happened, they're not on board. Or is there a problem, with their communications? And so we use that as a trigger for lots of different things if they go off the air, and we have processes to manage that. Apart from that, I was speaking about this the other day, and with all due respects to Kirsten, we like all the GGR entrants, and I like Kirsten, but we had a discussion in the office with some people that were asking similar questions, and that's just Kirsten's what she wants to do. But there's another thought that some people get a bit miffed about that because they'll be disappointed that Kirsten's not telling her story. She's not expressing herself for the entrance. She's always good on the phone, usually, unless she's depressed because she's not out the front or she thinks she's becalmed and others are sailing away when they might not be, and she could be leading. She doesn't know, but she really shows her emotions, and she's very sensitive to that. She can feel really down. But I think this is just a thing for her. We very rarely, if ever, see a text quote, and she just doesn't want to. There's a few possibilities there. I think she doesn't want the distraction. It is actually distracting to get your phone out or get the YB3 and have to tell people what you're doing. It breaks your serenity on board, or it breaks your mood or emotion about being at one with the sea and all that sort of stuff. It's certainly the weekly call absolutely breaks your feeling of being on board and sailing solo around the world without contact and so on. But at the same time, anytime she can get on the radio, she does. Who knows? I've got no answer for that, but it's not. It's up to them. As long as we get a message, we're happy, and then it's up to the skipper, and every skipper's different, so they've got a different attitude on the whole thing. Okay, so Robert, who has the best windward boat? Ooh, that's hard to say because it's a combination. There's not just boat and sails and things like that. Simon does really well on the water. He's a great sailor. He's got a well-prepared boat in terms of weight-wise. It's not overly heavy. He's got a great rig, which keeps his riding moment quite. He optimized his riding moment by having a light rig. That's why he doesn't have his other spare halyards up the mast, even saves a bit of weight on the mast. And so that's good for sailing, going to windward. His sails are good, and importantly, he's a racing sailor and he knows how to trim his sails. I'm not saying that other GGR entrants don't know how to trim their sails, but some are more cruising orientated and they might not be into the fine detail. So not only does Simon hold a very good course when he needs to, he knows how to trim his sails, and he will regularly trim his sails as if he's racing. He'll go up there, and by trim, I don't mean reefing, because a lot of the GGR sails will go up when it's a bit windy, I'm on my ear, I better reef the sails. Simon will probably go up just to trim the sails. Every time he moves course, he'll trim them perfectly, tweak the Cunningham, do the out haul, blah, 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 look at the wind flying off the leech of the main, all these sorts of things. He knows how to race a boat. And so that's as important as the boat. So I think I'd have to say that Simon's, absolutely one of the best windward packages rather than just the boat. In terms of the difference between Simon with a Biscay 36 and Abelish with a Rustler 36 and Kirsten with a, then Kirsten with the Cape George 36 and so on, I'd say, normally I'd say the Rustler may be better going to windward, but why would you want to go to windward in the GGR? Remember that. You don't. But occasionally it's nice to do. Normally, if I was there, I absolutely wouldn't be hard on the wind because you crack off a little bit. And even Abelish would be cracked off a little bit. And even Simon will as well, because they've got to fight the sea and there's a long way to go and you don't want to stress the boat. So it's not the highest to windward in flat water. There's so many things there. So it's a bit of a vague answer, But anyway, but certainly the Cape George 36 it's a great sailboat, but it wouldn't be the hottest windward boat because it's got a very full bow. It's got a lot of buoyancy up the bow, and that's one of its positive features for the GGR. It's great for that. So anyway, Don, you usually click away Chinese software ad, but it shows on the Hydrovanes. This was really strange. Yeah, that Chinese thing that pops up, I keep saying to Jane, get it off, but we can't. It just keeps popping up, which is a real pain. So anyway, but it's a funny one. Now, I can't see this, but it's very interesting. I'll have to try and have another computer there and watch what happens. But apparently, it's got nothing to do with me. It's not a free Hydrovane ad every time I click that off, and I'm not quite sure what's happening here, other than the fact that there is the advertising on the tracker. There's the little box on the top left, which is Le Sable d'Olonne and McIntyre Adventure. And the other one's the scrolling advertising box, which normally sits about there on the tracker. Okay. And maybe when I hit that to get rid of it, maybe that comes up behind it or something. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Warren, but it sounds kind of funny. It's got nothing to do with me. It's not part of my planning or organization. Okay. Wendy, hi, Don and GGR team. Are you at all concerned that good old-fashioned celestial navigation could be soon impossible with the amount of satellites that are planned to be installed in the near future? These satellites are very bright at night, and that's the Starlink satellites, but it'll never happen. They're not going to. First of all, the majority of the celestial navigation you do is using only one star, and that's the sun. And that usually happens in daylight, okay? Before, a few hours after the sun's up, you get a morning intersect, right? Morning sort of angle like this. And then in the afternoon, you get another one that's like that, and you walk them forward and they cross over and you've got to fix. And if you do your meridian passage in the middle, it's going this way and you're set. For fun, people sometimes will do star sights when they're using a star, and they'll put it, it's not night, it's twilights usually, when you can see the stars, but you see a bit of a horizon as well. And you can pull those stars down. The stars don't move, right? They're just fixed. They move minusculely. So if you set a time-lapse camera, you'll see the stars go in a big circle during the night. But when you're taking a celestial observation of a star and pull it down to the horizon, it's virtually not moving. Okay, but the Starlink satellites, they'll be zipping across the horizon, and it's or across the night sky. And I've got fond memories of being a kid in the country at night, laying back satellite spotting, and occasionally you'd find a satellite, and it was so exciting because, wow, look, there's a satellite. People say, what are you talking about? And people didn't know you could even see satellites. But it used to be a bit of fun. And now it's not hard to find a satellite. You can go up there, but it's not going to kill celestial navigation at all. And it's impossible to stop progress. And even the man himself is now worried about AI, but that's another issue. So be more worried about AI than a few satellites in the sky. Okay, AI is scary. Anyway, from Di, do the sailors in Chichester class know where the other boats are? Does Simon know he is theoretically in the lead? Well, it's up to the individual entrants to see if they have the ability to find out where the other entrants are. But in the scheme of things, as you've probably seen, Kirsten hasn't known that she was leading for weeks and weeks. She never got the news over the radio. That anyone could tell her where she's on the radio or whatever. I mean, it's the same as it was in 1968. So a lot of the time, the entrants don't know where they are. But when they're talking to each other, they swap positions. And in a group, they can find out where they are, but it's not uncommon for them not to know where they are. In terms of your question of state, does Simon know he's theoretically in the lead? Well, he's not theoretically in the lead of the GGR because he's not racing anymore, but he's certainly going to be in front of. He's probably going to be in front of both. He's already in front of Kirsten. And in front of Abelish soon because he sails really well. So he's certainly going to be in front of the rest of the boats in the GGR event. Let me put it that way. And I think he probably may not know that because his radio hasn't been performing very well during the course of the GGR. So he was isolated at the best of times. So in fact, it just reminded me, I meant to get onto the leaderboard today because I would have thought that Kirsten was actually out of the top ranking, but I had a look before I went on, but I forgot about it with all of the stuff going on. She's still well in the lead, theoretically, by the leaderboard, but that gets a bit distorted in terms of the real track that you've got to go. So technically, Kirsten's still in the lead. Okay, next one. Vincenzo, autumn season storms in the South Atlantic, as observed so far, they all seem to take their full power far from the South American coast. Is there any METO statistics data which suggests to choose a more west coastal routing in this season rather than remain so exposed in the center of the ocean? Well, the objective is to get north as fast as you can because then you're heading back to Les Sables d'Olonne. So to go choice of more west, the coastal routing in this season. Yeah, there is. If you went west up the coast that way, you could possibly get less because they do build once they've come off the coast. But that's risky as well because then you're going to get trapped on the coast with the trade winds. So Kirsten's route following Ocean Passage of the World was very clever. But at some point, you need to sort of start backing in to cross the doldrums. And I haven't got my copy of Ocean Passage of the World here, but I do have routing charts, and it would have been interesting to look. I haven't seen, but it's well known that the doldrums on the eastern side of the world are very wide, and they narrow right down until they come to the Brazilian coast when they're very thin. So maybe that's something that Kirsten missed. If it had been me, and she's not retrospect, it's just planning, I thought she did a brilliant job going out wide in the beginning, but you'd certainly want to, if you had the chance, come back in and cut the doldrums a little bit closer to Brazil. But that's got the trade-off, if it goes that way, you're in a worse windward position when you get to the northeasterly trades. And this is like yacht racing, some people go offshore, some people stay in the coast. It's choices you make, and once you've made them, you've got to live with them. And so she'll live with those choices, and it's not entirely wrong at the moment, but because she still made pretty good time. It's just that, you look back and people forget that when Simon was roaring up from the bottom, taking out 600-700 miles, he did that for two reasons. One was that he got a very good break with the weather. The second one was that he sailed incredibly well, as he does. And that's a roller coaster, when Kirsten was coming into Hobart, she took out 700 miles on Simon because he didn't have weather forecasting on his radio because he couldn't use his radio properly, which is his problem as the skipper on that boat. His preparation wasn't quite as good as it should have been, maybe. so he couldn't get the weather forecast. Kirsten was getting everything. She was getting weather faxes and all the rest of it. So she was able to skirt the center of the system and keep the breeze. Took 700 miles out, Now, that was smart planning from Kirsten, maybe bad preparation for Simon, but it's yacht racing. There's so many different things there, and you live by your choices, and it's a big, complicated matrix. So there's no hard and fast rule to go inshore, I'd say, to answer your question, Vincenzo. It's certainly late in the season. Something we forget. And it's what I'm saying. When you get around Cape Horn, don't worry, it's not over yet. You got to get above the 40s, and even a little bit higher. And Ian's paying the price now. When you get around that corner, you just don't want to hang around. Boy, I don't have much hair, but some of it was getting pulled out when Ian was talking about his 20 centimeter tear in the main, which happens. It'll be good to see what that story was about, why he wasn't using the main, because you just got to get out of there. You got to get out and around Cape Horn and be done with it. The longer you're in that zone, the more susceptible you are to being hit, and you try and stay there as little as possible. Okay, John Edward, Don McIntyre, will you consider having a virtual Ocean Globe in 23 with Virtual Globe 23? Yes, we would. My somewhat selfish reason, I want to have another stab at this celestial navigation around the world. Yeah, that's right. It worked out really well. I'm a bit sorry I didn't get a chance to promote it as hard as I possibly should have. I have a lot of things going on in just managing the GGR, and it's got huge potential. It's a lot of fun if you want to know about celestial or just have a different type of virtual race. So it was all pretty cool. So okay, one last question by the look of it, from Patty. How close do the boaters have to be before they can see each other? Oh, wow. Okay, well, if you're 3 miles off, you get about it's about just less than a meter of horizon drop every nautical mile. Okay, so if you're sailing along, I've got a rule of thumb. There's all these things you do, which I'll go through it one day. If you want to see degrees, you can put your fingers out like that, and you can actually 3 fingers, how many degrees that is. So if you've got your tables, you can work out blah blah. But as a rule of thumb, if you can see the beach when you're approaching the coast, you're about 3 miles off, because the beach is the sand. Okay, and so you got a little less than 1 meter of drop per nautical mile. So if you're standing in the cockpit of a boat, you're usually about 2 to 3 meters. The bottom of the cockpit usually sort of about a meter up, and you'll be a couple of meters. So there's a 3. So you'll see the horizon usually is about 3 miles away as well. That's the horizon. And so if you've got another person on the other side, 3 miles away, that's 6 miles. You might see his head from 6 miles away if you've got binoculars, right? And so it depends what you're looking at. If you're looking at a ship, they're quite big and tall. You can sometimes see them from 10, 12 miles. It depends on the visibility. So yeah, simple question. Simple answer. Okay, I'll quickly scan through the comments here to see if anyone's got any other question. What is the best book to get on sailing? Oh, jeepers. Depends on what part of sailing. If you want it to learn to sail, I couldn't give you a suggestion, but some of the best books on sailing, oh, jeepers, you got to look at the word of my own, Robin Ox Johnson, The Long Route, The Long Way from Bernard Batessia, Hiscock's books about cruising under sail. There's some great ones now about that have been written on previous or on the first GGR as well. But yeah, that's a wide open question. Maybe depends what sort of sailing. There's lots of different things. What's my favorite sailing book? My favorite sailing book is probably Jessica Watson. Going around the world. Anyway, I digress. Sorry, I can't give you much more advice on that one. Joshua Slocum, Sailing Around the World. That was a classic, boy. But there's a lot of them out there. Craig, DP Grip. Craig, do you mean Grid Files? Craig, hey Don, I can't see that. Patchy means, hey Don, did you ever fly around Australia in that little microlight? Yes, I did. I did a world first flight in a gyrocopter. That's looks like a helicopter. It was a 2-seater, but I put a huge fuel tank in the back seat, and it was the first ever gyrocopter flight around Australia. It took about 23 days or something, and it was a lot of fun. It was like a motorbike in the sky because open cockpit, it was a fantastic trip. If you want to see it, you can get on to McIntyreadventure.com and you'll see some mention of it. We did some crazy things, totally illegal, of course, but had a lot of fun flying down with cars on highways and stuff like that. It was really cool. And so Patchy Moon, so seen that one. Hit the like, folks, as it helps. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Thanks for Patchy Moonshine. Hit the likes, because it's amazing. I looked at, we had about 1,700 emotions on the last newsletter. Was it 1,700 or 1,100 or something? And I go through and I hit everyone that hits the like. I go through, like, gives an emotion. I go through that and I invite the people that haven't actually liked the GGR Facebook page. It's unbelievable. We're still running at about 1/3. Only 1/3 of the people that are actually liking the posts actually like the GGR Facebook page. So we're running at 59,000 now of people that like the GGR Facebook page. And if that represents 1/3, there's 150,000 people that might be following the GGR. And I'd believe it, because the actual numbers, the turnover that we're getting for people on, the impressions and all that sort of stuff is really quite high. The website's going nuts. It's going crazy. There's millions. It's just 129 million page views or something. It's just crazy. So it's fantastic. So yes, great idea. If you really want to help us, Jane and I and the team and all that sort of stuff, please like the. I'm gonna redo this on the tracker tomorrow. I forgot that. Please like the GGR Facebook page and keep the comments coming. Comments are fun to read. I try and like all the ones that I see. And the same on YouTube. If you can actually help us a lot just by liking or subscribing to our YouTube page. I don't sell that enough. Like a lot of sites I get on, people say, "Oh, remember to like and share, blah blah blah, and do this and do that and stuff." I never do it, but anyway, I appreciate the support. We got Jane Zhu. Don't blame the Chinese. Yeah, okay. Best offshore race. Oh, thanks. Brian, I always use grid files. Don't you guys use that to compare with Windy? No, I never worry about grid files. So Windy is everything for me, and it's really quite easy for me to use to explain to people what's going on, because it's such good graphics. I remember when Windy first came out. Prior to that, I used to use Passage Weather, which was a very generic type thing, like grid files, little arrows and stuff. And then all of a sudden, Windy turns up, and it's like, whoa, check this out. It's just so simple to use. It's sort of like generic. All the voices going well, but the screen frozen time to time. Oh, internet. Hopefully it's still there. Okay, Golden Globe official. I think I'm just trying to get to Petromin. So Steve talking crap. Jane, his guy hit the rocks. What's this one? It's not fair if like to see this beautiful man. I'm not sure what's going on there. Golden Globe official, Stephen Forsgate. Stephen, good to see you down in Antarctica. Vincenzo, Ian's experience with drogues might suggest that a wind pilot allowing to raise the rudder from the water could avoid the drogues, but you're wrong. Totally wrong. I got to tell you, that was usually you get stories about servo pendulum systems that get ripped off the back of the boat with drogues. And GGR experience with that happened a few times. And it happened to, what's his name, Sailing to the Start. It was the beginning of the end when he bent his, I forget even what wind vane it was, or servo pendulum. But anyway, he lost his boat in the end off heading towards Cape Horn. Our safety officer, who was that? I forget. Anyway, but no, servo pendulums have got even worse. Sorry? Shane Freeman, that's right. Yeah, he had the same problem. Servo pendulum's even worse, because you've got the pendulum blade going from side to side, okay, as it's steering the boat. And when that happens, it's easier to hook up the slack drogue line. The key to it is, and this is what happened to Ian when he ripped off the blade off the hydrovane, was he was doing 1.5 knots with the drogue out. You cannot do that. You can't afford to do that. If you've got a drogue out, the reason the drogue is there is to slow the boat down in heavy weather. As soon as the boat starts to slow down or the wind backs off, you got to get the drogue out, because it's not doing any good anyway, right? And Ian was doing very low speeds, 1.5 knots, and it was just, and a big sea just wallowing, and it's just a natural. It's going to happen, So remember, but and today Ian said he's dreading the thought of putting the drogue out because it's such a big job to put the series drogue out and get it back in. It's a nightmare. That's another reason I'm a fan of warps, because warps are relatively easy to get out and in, and it's easier to manage the speed or the drag. You can actually start pulling in a line a lot easier. You can start pulling in a big series drogue because it's fixed to the line, and vary the amount of resistance that you've got, which allows you to vary the speed, because sometimes you don't want to slow down, and that gives you a lot of flexibility with the wind vane. While the wind vane's working, you can, as you're slowing down, if you need less drag, you just pull in the warps and it'll slow it down a bit. And so there's a bit of an opportunity to do that. But overall, I hate the thought of running lines as well as warps and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, very complicated argument. What I'd say there's certainly nothing wrong with the series drogue, nothing wrong with a warp and a car tire and chains and all that sort of stuff. But every situation is different. You got to train with it, know what you want to do and how you do it and so on. So, Brian, GJ's best race. So I agree. Back to the roots. Don, how come you're so chirpy? Do you ever sleep? Yes, I do. Thank you for that. Patchy Moonshine, couldn't they be sneaky and use their fuel up, then fill it with water right at the end? No, you see, we motor over to the fuel dock, and motors don't run on water. Anyway, but you're not the only person to suggest that. And it's funny, anyone could cheat in the GGR and they might get away with it, but they probably won't. But why would you cheat against yourself? It's not, you don't do the GGR and decide to cheat because it's such a huge effort. Hey, Don from Belgium, did you change your opinion of Abolish winning the GGR? No, not yet. No, but I only talk about that every Friday. He's looking in a pretty good position. As his wife, Ermi, said the other day, though, the boats are getting tired, they're getting worn out. And I'd say that's particularly the case with Abolish's boat. As you know, now he's had a pretty good run with not having to repair and fix things, but he himself was saying that it's a big challenge. Things break and he's got to fix it. And so anything can happen. It's never over until the very end. And they could get another big storm right at the end, touch wood, I hope they don't, but it can still happen in the North Atlantic, looking forward to I think that's as far as I can get. Okay, that's it. So another long one. So thanks for that, and I'll see you again tomorrow for another tracker update. And we're all thinking of Ian. So thanks for that. See you later.